What you are about to hear will make you question every shadow in your own home, every sound in the quiet of the night. These are stories where reality twisted into a nightmare. Let's begin with a tale of trust broken in the most chilling way. A few years back, I was new to a sleepy town, knowing just one person. An introvert in a place full of retirees. I was desperate for any connection. My friend, let's call her Sarah, thought she was helping by introducing me to a couple in their 50s who needed a pet sitter. We met at their home, a dated brick ranch that felt forgotten. I didn't mind the state of it. The dogs were lovely. The couple, however, were unsettling. Polite, but their eyes never met mine. Instead, I felt their gaze scanning my entire body, sizing me up. They gave a silent tour, just opening doors and closing them. They also ran a small firearm business from the home, which explained the cameras. Cameras everywhere. Hallways, kitchen, garage, even pointing at the kitchen table. They called it a business precaution. The job came. They left for a week. I set up in their office where a monitor showed all the camera feeds. It was comforting, watching the empty driveway and woods from inside. The first night was fine. On the second, I saw the driveway feed go dark. Rural internet is spotty, I reasoned. But then the dogs scrambled up and shot through their dog door, barking madly into the black backyard. My heart hammered. I called them back with treats and, shaking, blocked the dog door with a heavy chair. The next morning, the house was too quiet. The dogs were outside. The heavy chair was now 5 feet away, tucked in a corner. I called Sarah in a panic. We searched the empty house. She said maybe I hadn't pushed the chair firmly. I had to believe her. Days later, I was in the office when I glanced at the monitor. Every single camera feed was offline. All of them. I texted the owners, got no reply. Near midnight, the dogs erupted again. I grabbed a knife, saw nothing in the yard, and blocked the door once more, taking a photo as proof. Then, a heavy thump echoed from a back room. A paralyzing feeling of a presence filled the air. I called out, my voice trembling. Silence. I locked the room's door and retreated to the couch, weapon in hand. My phone lit up. A text from the wife. Hi. Don't worry about the cameras. You're safe. How did she know safety was my concern? Then another. Can you check if I left the inner garage door open? I don't want anything getting in. That door was in the locked room. My gut screamed. A third text came as I stood frozen in the hall. I see you're up. Can you please go in and check? The hallway camera. They were watching. Reluctant, I unlocked the door. The garage door was ajar, a pool of absolute darkness. As I stepped closer, my phone screen lit up with a notification, casting a faint glow. It illuminated the outline of an arm, pressed against the wall right beside the door. I ran, slammed doors, fumbled for my keys at the front door. As my car started, the garage door began grinding open. My headlights flooded the space, revealing a man crouched behind a box, right where I would have been. I flew to the police. They found nothing. The wife texted, "Plans changed. We'll be home soon. You can go now." As I drove away, I saw a car with no headlights turn into their driveway. I texted a warning. The instant reply, "I know." The comfort of a home had become the perfect watch trap. Now, to a different kind of unease. I worked at a bustling bar with a no-waiters policy. One busy weekend, an elderly couple sat in a corner booth. At first, just an odd choice for a rowdy spot. Later, I realized they were utterly motionless. Not talking, not looking at each other, just staring at the wall. During a lull, I approached. The woman didn't react. The man turned slowly. His face was pallid, eyes deeply sunken. He gave a single, silent shake of his head. The feeling was profoundly wrong. I hurried away. Later, I glanced over. Both were now staring directly at me, unblinking. By closing, they were gone. I asked my veteran coworker if she'd seen them. She listed a dozen other patrons in detail, but had no memory of that couple. Was I losing it? Walking to my car, I saw them. 2 dark figures standing under a streetlight across the road. I didn't wait. I never saw them again, and I have no explanation. Some presences don't need to break in. They simply appear where they don't belong. Let's journey into the deep woods. My friend's father was a logger, working with a massive tree saw in the Pacific Northwest. He and his partner, Grant, were in an extremely remote site. Strange chatter began on their radios, muffled voices that followed them across channels. Then, they found signs they weren't alone. Footprints, a hidden tent. Inside that tent was a duffel bag. It contained children's underwear, rope, duct tape, and horrific sketches. The radio chatter became clearer. Men talking casually about gathering firewood. My friend's dad, furious, grabbed the radio and demanded to know who they were. Dead silence. That night, footsteps crunched on the gravel outside their camper. The door handle jiggled. Then, long, deliberate scratches dragged down the metal door. After agonizing minutes, my friend's dad went to look. The door burst open. A knife struck his face. He fell, and a man was on him, blade at his throat. Another kicked his head. Grant tackled the attacker, and both men fled into the night. My friend's dad survived with permanent eye damage. 2 weeks later, another logger from their crew was found murdered. No one was ever caught. The deep woods don't just hide trees. A story from a secluded lake. My wealthy friend Alex had a family home there. One quiet night, just the two of us on the dock, I saw a light flashing from a house across the water. Pattern: 3 short, 3 long, 3 short. We knew it was stupid. We were young, drinking, and I was avoiding police. But the adventurer in us won. We grabbed knives from his brother's room and took a kayak. The target house was dilapidated. Its dock collapsed. We slipped in through an unlocked window. The place was stripped bare, completely empty. Upstairs, in the room the light came from, we found an old projector aimed at the window. It was a setup. We sprinted for our lives. Downstairs, a closet door burst open behind us. Thundering footsteps gave chase. We reached the shore. The kayak was gone. A large man sprinted from the house. We had one choice: the freezing lake. We swam, adrenaline numbing the cold, and made it home. The police found nothing. An empty, abandoned house. Someone had laid a perfect trap, and we had paddled right into it. Next, a mystery next door. I moved into a nice neighborhood. My neighbor, Leo, was a young guy in a massive house, living alone. He was friendly but always too busy to hang out. I noticed he never had visitors, never left. Then, one Wednesday at 2 a.m., loud music. I saw 7 cars in his driveway. Party. I went over to ask him to turn it down. The door was unlocked. Inside, a pile of shoes but no people. The music was a recording. A loop of laughter and clinking glasses. Fake party. A heavy, mechanical grinding sound came from the basement that I crept down. Through a crack in a door, I saw 3 older men in work clothes and goggles. A powerful smell of bleach hit me. A deep, primal fear told me to run. As I turned, the light behind me dimmed. The door had shut. I fled. From my dark office, I watched 8 men pour out of the house, arguing. Leo's car and all the others vanished the next morning. He never came back. The grass grew long. What were they doing in that basement? And why stage a fake party to hide the sound of a saw? After a divorce, I moved to my late grandfather's remote house. The peace shattered on the 7th night. Whistling. A slow, off-key tune from the woods behind the house. It returned each night, closer. Always around 1:17 a.m. A deputy told me my grandfather had called about the same whistling for years. They'd never found anyone. I found grandfather's journals. He wrote of it every spring, sitting with his rifle. The whistling crept closer. The shed, the porch, then under the floorboards. From the crawl space point one night, I sat vigil with a shotgun. At 1:17, the whistling started, but from the hallway inside the house. Steps came closer. I flipped the light on. Nothing. 2 nights later, knocking. From inside. Then a floorboard creaked in the hall. The hallway light went out. At the end of the dark hall, a figure in black stood perfectly still, pale face just visible. It ran out the front door. The door was unlocked. They had a key. I left and never went back. Someone had been watching that house, waiting for its occupants to be alone, for decades. Alone in my small house, working late, silence. Then, pounding footsteps sprinted down the hall. 3 deafening bangs on my bedroom door, like a battering ram. I froze, waiting for the door to crash in. Didn't. Then, footsteps ran back down the hall. I chased, screaming, but found nothing. Every door and window was locked. The police found no one. How do you explain an intruder who vanishes into thin air within a sealed house? Finally, a house with a life of its own. My job was clearing out a foreclosed home in rural New York. A call came through on my work phone, no signal, unknown caller. Static, then a whisper. Don't answer the phone in the bedroom. The house had a rotary phone on a nightstand. Later, it rang. A shrill, mechanical ring from a dead line. I didn't answer. In the basement, I found notebooks, lists of names and dates. Notes like, rang once, didn't answer. Picked up, warned him. I quit the job. The guy who took over called me the next day. The phone in the bedroom with no service rang while I was in there. What the hell? He quit too. That house wasn't just empty. It was waiting. When I was 10, we moved. My new bedroom felt wrong. I'd hear shuffling in the closet, see the door tremble, tapping on my second-story window, no branches near it. One night, I saw a pale hand pressed against the outside glass. It slowly slid down. My little brother started talking about the white lady who visited him. One stormy night, I woke to see my locked window sliding open. A tall figure in a white dress floated in, leaning over me with empty black eyes. I screamed. My parents found the window closed and locked. They called it night terrors. But I saw the hand first, and I'll always wonder what she wanted. The last story is a visit gone wrong. An old friend, Ben, invited me to his remote mountain house. He was different, distant, awkward, constantly glancing down a long, dark hallway. The first night, I heard frantic sprinting footsteps above me at 2 a.m. The second night, scraping sounds from that hallway. The third night, I woke paralyzed. In the darkness at the hall's end, I saw Ben's silhouette, standing perfectly still, watching me. He turned and walked into a room. When I could move, I went to the room. A figure stood in the corner, facing away. I ran upstairs and woke Ben. He was asleep. I asked, Ben, who is that downstairs? He just shrugged. I left immediately in the snow. As I drove off, I looked back. A silhouette was in the window of that dark room. He never really spoke to me again. I don't know who or what was in that house with him. Now, to a story from a new mother. I was staying in my grandmother's old house by a swamp with my baby daughter, Lola. The summer heat was unbearable, and local folks said staying there in that season was unwise. But we had nowhere else to go. Lola was a difficult baby, crying constantly and wearing me down to a thread. One night, as the cicadas screamed outside, I noticed a change come over her. She became still, too still. And in the gloom of the hot room, her eyes didn't seem to reflect the light right. It was like something ancient was looking out from behind them. The local warning echoed in my head. A child can be changed by the things that wait in the summer swamp. I packed our bags at dawn and never went back. Here's one that still gives me chills about a simple toy. I was babysitting 2 young boys, and before bed, we were playing with a toy piano. I taught the older one, just 5, how to play Mary Had a Little Lamb. Later, I was reading them a story up on the top bunk when we clearly heard the toy piano from the playroom downstairs. It was playing that tune note for note. Both boys looked at me and whispered, "Who's playing with the piano?" I had no answer. I stayed frozen on that top bunk, reading book after book, until I heard the parents' car in the driveway. That house was either haunted, or someone had been in there with us the whole time. Sometimes, the horror isn't a ghost, but a premonition that comes true in the worst way. A friend's mother, in her 20s, went to a psychic for fun with a friend. The psychic told her friend that soon she would have more money than she ever imagined, but it would cost her everything. They laughed it off. A month later, there was a massive gas explosion at her friend's apartment building. She was trapped inside and suffered burns over 70% of her body. She survived, and it was found the city knew about the gas leak and hadn't fixed it. She received a multi-million-dollar settlement. The psychic was right. Cost her everything. Have you ever had a moment where reality seemed to glitch? A person who used to jog near their gym told me about their neighborhood. They'd sometimes see people walking who looked like they were glitching, like a video game character stuck on a texture. They'd be moving but not getting anywhere. As they got closer, the person would suddenly walk forward normally. One time, someone turned a corner after glitching and simply vanished, even though it was a long street with no driveways to duck into. It happened at least 3 times. It makes you wonder what we're really seeing when we look at the world. This one is about a shared nightmare. Years ago, a couple and their roommate rented a filthy, awful apartment in Florida. The worst part was the stairs. For the woman, every time she was on them, she'd get a vivid, terrifying mental image of an evil old woman with white hair in a bun and black, glaring holes for eyes. The fear was so primal she'd nearly fall trying to get away. Their kitten would also hiss and run in terror on the stairs. They never spoke of it, thinking they were going crazy. A year after moving out, the 3 got together. When the woman mentioned the stairs freaked her out, her husband agreed. The roommate then said, "I swear there was an evil old lady with white hair in a bun with black." And all 3 finished in unison. Glaring holes for eyes. They had all seen the exact same entity independently and never said a word. A building contractor told me about the day he was demolishing an old house. He was on his bulldozer when, in his peripheral vision, he saw an old woman in a granny dress and bonnet, shaking a stick at him and yelling, "What are you doing to my house?" He stopped, shut off the dozer, and went to tell her it wasn't safe, but there was no one there. He asked a neighbor, who told him an elderly woman matching that exact description used to live there, but she had died about 10 years earlier. This story is a quiet, British kind of haunting. A woman wrote that in 1916, she was living in a large, spooky house in Devon. One evening, as she sat with her mother and a friend, her terrier, Prickles, got up. He walked to the door, looked up, and wagged his tail, greeting someone who had just entered. He then turned and happily accompanied the invisible visitor across the room before stopping, watching them leave and sighing. He clearly liked his unseen friend, who was invisible to everyone else. Another from the English countryside involves a ghost with a purpose. A woman owned an old farmhouse that once belonged to a family named Hawkins. She and her children would often smell strong tobacco smoke in the house, though none of them smoked. When her beloved mare was having a difficult birth, she went to the stable, terrified. There, she suddenly smelled the familiar pipe smoke and felt a comforting, calming presence. The mare settled, and the foal was delivered safely. She later learned from a descendant of the Hawkins family that they were all devoted to animals and all smoked pipes, a fact she had never known. A woman walking in Taunton, Devon, over 10 years ago described seeing a woman with a face of the most dreadful distress, tears rolling down her cheeks, moving through the crowd. The look of grief was so appalling she felt compelled to follow, but the woman vanished instantly. When she turned to her companions, amazed, they had seen nothing. At that moment, she realized they were passing the site of the bloody assizes, a place of historical misery and death. A grandfather's diary recorded a family omen. In the Hastings family, there was a tradition that before a death, a family member would hear the sound of carriage wheels driving to the door when no carriage was there. In 1868, Lord Bute was at Cardiff Castle when he heard the carriage. He even went to the door. News soon came that the young Marquis of Hastings had died. Decades later, the then Marquis of Bute and his wife heard a carriage at their Scottish home. No one arrived. The next day, word came of another death in the Hastings family. A truly disturbing encounter from a paramedic. A man was working a night shift when they got a call for a man down in a rough part of the city. They arrived to find a man in his 40s, delirious and covered in dirt, claiming he had just been buried alive. He said he'd been attacked and woke up in a shallow grave, clawing his way out. My friend thought it was drugs or psychosis, until they rolled him to check for injuries. Underneath him, packed into the grooves of his jacket and skin, was fresh, damp soil. The kind of soil you only find several feet underground. This one is a historical terror. The story of the USS West Virginia after Pearl Harbor. After the attack, salvage crews heard banging from deep inside the sunken ship. It was men trapped in an air pocket. They couldn't cut them out because water would flood in and drown them, and they couldn't get to them from above due to flammable gases. The banging continued for days, then stopped. When the ship was raised 6 months later, they found the bodies of 3 sailors in a sealed compartment. Next to them was a calendar, with days crossed off from December 7th to December 23rd. They had survived, trapped in the dark, for 16 days before suffocating. A family story of hidden tragedy. A woman told me her maternal grandfather, years ago, put a large pot of water on the stove to boil for his wife and children to bathe before he left for work. The pot boiled over, extinguishing the flame. The gas kept flowing. He returned home to find his entire first family dead from carbon monoxide poisoning. My friend's mother was from his second marriage. An eye doctor shared a medical nightmare. A patient came in with a horribly infected, swollen eyelid that wouldn't heal with antibiotics. Finally, the doctor flipped the eyelid inside out. There, embedded in the tissue, was what looked like an abscess. But it moved. They removed it in one piece. It was a fly larva. The patient then remembered a bug had hit her eye days before the infection started. A story of a house holding a decades-long secret. A medium was asked to do a walkthrough of a home under renovation where the owners reported activity. In the basement, she felt compelled by the spirit of a teen girl. Later, she learned the home's history. Years ago, the owner's wife and 15-year-old daughter had supposedly run away. The medium, while in a trance, had led people to a false wall in that basement. 3 weeks after her visit, workers fixing a pipe broke down that same false wall and found a skeleton. It was the 17-year-old girl who had run away in the 1970s. The medium had accidentally solved a 50-year-old cold case. A simple, eerie moment. A man was working late in his home office when he clearly heard his brother, who lived 4 hours away, call out "hello" in his distinctive voice from downstairs, as if he just arrived for a visit. He yelled back that he'd be down in a second, but when he went downstairs, no one was there. Puzzled, he went back to work. Moments later, the landline rang. It was his brother, calling from his home 4 hours away, to say he'd be visiting in a couple of days. He was definitely on the phone at his own house. What had greeted him? A reminder that not all spirits are frightening. A woman wrote that after her father had moved to a nursing home, she was in the empty family kitchen one night and got a sudden, powerful whiff of his strong, cheap cologne. It was so distinct she even joked aloud to the empty house. She went upstairs, and minutes later, the phone rang. It was the nursing home. Her father had just passed away. Finally, a story of something ancient in the forest. A group of friends on a hiking trip in Scandinavia got hopelessly lost. As their situation grew dire, injured and starving, they began to feel they were being stalked by something that moved through the trees without sound. They found bizarre, ancient artifacts and began to have shared nightmares of a horned entity. One by one, they were picked off not just by exposure, but by something that watched from the shadows, something that belonged to the oldest, darkest parts of the woods. It was less a haunting and more a reclaiming by a force that was there long before humans. These are moments where the world cracks open, revealing something hidden and chilling. If these stories gripped you, show the channel some love. Give this video a like and make sure you're following Winds of Thought for more journeys into the unexplained. What would you have done in that first story, knowing you were being watched? Let us know below.